Coming up on 5 Minute News. Biden and Trump locked in tight races in battleground states. Voters see US election as judgment on Trump. And Postal Service tells US judge it cannot complete sweep for delayed ballots by deadline. It's Wednesday, November 4. I'm Anthony Davis. Across America, millions of people went to the polls amid an election campaign fraught with anxiety over the prospect of voter intimidation and the chance of civil unrest after an historically divisive election. But as polls started to close on the east coast of the US, reports from across the country reflected a day of peaceful voting, with only sporadic reports of incidents of intimidation or technical problems with voting machines. President Donald Trump and Democratic challenger Joe Biden were locked in tight races in battleground states across the country on Tuesday night as they concluded an epic campaign that will shape America's response to the surging pandemic and foundational questions of economic fairness and racial justice. Biden picked up the first battleground state of the night, New Hampshire, a small prize that Trump tried to steal from Democrats. But races were too early to call in the most fiercely contested and critical states on the map, including Florida, North Carolina, Georgia, and Pennsylvania. Biden won California, the nation's biggest electoral haul, and other predictable victories including Colorado and Virginia, two former battlegrounds that have become Democratic strongholds. Trump's wins included Kansas, North Dakota, and other conservative bastions. Americans made their choices as the nation faced a confluence of historic crises, with each candidate declaring the other fundamentally unfit to navigate the challenges. Daily life has been upended by the coronavirus, which has killed more than 232,000 Americans and cost millions of jobs. These issues seemed not to deter vehement Trump supporters. Millions of voters braved their worries about the virus and some long lines to turn out in person, joining 102 million fellow Americans who voted days or weeks earlier, a record number that represented 73% of the total vote in the 2016 election. Early results in several key battleground states were in flux as election officials processed an historically large number of mail-in votes. Democrats typically outperform Republicans in mail voting, while the GOP looks to make up ground in Election Day turnout. That means the early margins between the candidates could be influenced by which type of votes, early or Election Day, were being reported by the states. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell of Kentucky won re-election in an early victory for the Republicans, and GOP Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina, a close Trump ally, fought off a fierce challenge to hang on to his seat. The pandemic and the fragile economy weighed heavily on voters in Tuesday's election, a contest that for many amounted to a referendum on Donald Trump's leadership in a time of turmoil. An expansive survey of the electorate found roughly two-thirds of voters said their opinion of the Republican president, either for or against, drove their choice. Only about a third said the same of his Democratic rival, former Vice President Joe Biden. This was the case nationally, as well as in many of the battleground states that will determine which candidate wins a majority in the Electoral College. The results suggest that Trump's leadership, personality, and omnipresence have defined the race, even as voters grappled with an historic set of overlapping crises. As the coronavirus surges across the country, roughly 4 in 10 voters said the pandemic was the top concern facing the country. The economy followed close behind, the choice of about 3 in 10 voters. In a year of racial justice protests and debate over structural racism, only about 1 in 10 voters cited racism as the most important issue. Trump and Biden faced a dissatisfied and distrustful electorate. About 6 in 10 voters are unhappy with the direction of the country. Roughly 3/4 said they are dissatisfied or angry with the way the federal government is working. More than 100 million Americans rushed to vote early and by mail, taking advantage of new rules intended to make voting safer and easier during the pandemic. Trump has sought to sow doubt about the new voting systems and the legitimacy of the count, and claimed without evidence that some voters might cheat. The survey found about 3 in 10 expressing doubts that their votes would be accurately counted. The U.S. Postal Service told a judge it could not complete his order to sweep mail processing facilities on Tuesday afternoon for delayed election ballots and immediately dispatch any for delivery in about a dozen states, including closely fought battlegrounds Pennsylvania and Florida. USPS data showed, as of Sunday, about 300,000 ballots that were received for mail processing did not have scans confirming their delivery to election authorities. While ballots may be delivered without scans, voting rights groups fear mail delays could cause at least some of those votes to be disqualified. U.S. District Judge Emmett Sullivan on Tuesday had ordered the sweep in response to lawsuits by groups including Vote Forward, the NAACP, and Latino community advocates. Affected by the order were processing centers in central Pennsylvania, northern New England, Great South Carolina, South Florida, Colorado, Wisconsin, and parts of Illinois, Arizona, Alabama, and Wyoming, as well as the cities of Atlanta, Houston, Philadelphia, and Detroit. Lawyers for the USPS told Sullivan in a court filing that the agency was not able to complete the sweeps by 4:30 p.m., but was working as expeditiously as possible to comply with this court's orders while recognizing physical and operational limitations and the need to avoid disrupting key activities on Election Day. The Justice Department said postal inspectors were still reviewing 220 facilities handling election mail, including logs for accuracy, scanning for delayed mail, and ensuring election mail was processed expeditiously and no ballots were being held for postage due. Many states would only count mailed ballots that were received by the end of Tuesday in their election results. The Postal Service said it had delivered 122 million blank and completed ballots before Tuesday. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Please subscribe, rate, and review us at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an independent production covering politics, inequality, health, and climate, delivering unbiased, verified, and truthful world news daily.